little bit cut off screen, same as with Kerry's presentation before. We tried everything we could do. So let me introduce briefly myself. My name is Dietrich, for those who haven't seen me before. I'm sorry for that. Alex, I think, introduced me that way. I'm from Germany. But I don't want to talk about football this day. I will talk a little bit about football after lunch. So if you come to my next talk, we can discuss things. So I'm working for Oracle. I'm working as a master product manager, and I work not from the Munich office. Actually, I work from home because I travel a lot. And my career in Oracle spans now over 6 years of RDBMS mission critical support, followed by 5.5 years pre-sales, followed by now over 7 years of development work. So I work live at customers in reference projects, and besides that I do a lot of workshops. So for me, actually, I think it's the 4th or 5th time in São Paulo and in Brazil. I really like to come here. Great country, great people. And that is the beauty of my job. I get to know a lot of people and a lot of customers worldwide. So if you want to have access to the slides, you note down blogs.oracle.com/upgrade. And if you scroll down underneath my old picture from 8 years ago, you find a slides download center. It's about upgrade, migration, performance, and almost everything around that topic. But you find also this presentation here, single tenant for DBAs, or the talk I will do after lunch called Full Transportable Export. Now, before I really dig into what's Oracle single tenant, what's Oracle multi-tenant, I would like to give you a very brief overview what the feature is all about. So what is single tenant? What is multi-tenant? And I'd like to answer that in the next upcoming, it's not 45 minutes now, let's see if we can fit it in a little bit less. So actually, when you take Oracle 12c, and let me ask you first, who's live on Oracle 12c? Who has a production database on 12c? Okay. You are aware that Oracle 11.204 is under extended support. 11.203 will go completely out of bug fixing support in 3.5 weeks. Yes? You're aware of that? Oh. Okay, let's take 12c. We take it, we install it as standalone, and it is like you know every Oracle release. Maybe not like Carrie since Oracle 2, but my career started with Oracle 7.2.3. So since 7.2.3, you install Oracle that way. All good. But you can also choose to install it single tenant or multi-tenant. And the difference is in single tenant, you have only one active pluggable database, whereas in multi-tenant, you can have up to 252 pluggable databases right now. And that may be lifted in a future release to several thousand. Now what does it mean for you? So standalone installation, everything works as in previous releases. But if you do single tenant, there's no extra license required. That is important to know. You can do this with Standard Edition or Enterprise Edition, one active pluggable database. But for multi-tenant, more than one pluggable database, you need the multi-tenant license, and that works only on Enterprise Edition. Now, what I would recommend to you is that you first read documentation. My wife always accuses me that I don't read documentation. We get a new dishwasher, and I just go in and try to install it. And if I fail brutally, she smiles at me and says, "Have you read the docs before?" In that case, it could be a very similar experience. So read the doc. Or if you don't want to read the 200 new pages in the admin guide, you at least take this white paper, you skip the first 11 pages of marketing information, and then you go to the tech details, and you get a very good overview about what's in multi-tenant, what's in single tenant. Now, something you need to be aware is that, as I said before, we say non-CDB, which means no multi-tenant, no single tenant, works as expected. You don't have to use multi-tenant or single tenant right now, but if you look closer into the release guide and the new features guide and the upgrade guide, you find that interesting sentence, the deprecation of the non-CDB architecture. And it says, okay, it's deprecated. That doesn't mean right now anything. It just means we don't develop standalone architectures further. And it is the lift for Oracle often to say, at some point we may day support something. Now we are really precise. So you can relax, lean back. We say not in 12.2. So 12.1, 12.2, everything will be the same. But maybe in a release after that, whatever the name will be, it could be that there is no standalone installation available anymore. So you can either choose between single or multi-tenant. And that is the main reason why not only I insist, but if you've been to Tim Hall's talk this morning, Tim insists also very well to customers that you have to play with the feature right now. If you fail to play with it right now, the Oracle train someday will roll over you and you find yourself sitting there and saying, oh my God, what is that? So you have to play with that feature. Now the concepts. That is a single tenant container database. The gray brick here on my slide, that is called the root container. That is where you administer from, and you will find always this PDB $seed. That is a pluggable database, but it doesn't count for license reasons. It's like a blueprint. And you use that PDB $seed when you create a new pluggable database. We say you provision a new pluggable database, which basically means we clone the seed container and we add a temporary table space to it. So that is very fast because up that point, that goes within seconds, and it's an up and running thing. It's an up and running database. So you can import stuff into it. You don't have to run any extra scripts. So that is very fast, the deployment. You can also take a standalone database and plug it in as long as it's in 12 database. And you can have a second container database down here, and you can unplug and plug, or you can clone remotely if you want in single tenant. If you have a multi-tenant deployment, the same concept works. So you provision a new one, or you clone locally. That is only available with multi-tenant. Wouldn't be possible in single tenant because at this point you would have had 2 active pluggable databases. Then it's multi-tenant, not single tenant anymore. And you can take a standalone database and plug it in. And of course, with multi-tenant, you can also have a second container database, could be locally or remotely somewhere, and you can unplug and plug into that. That could be different versions, higher or lower, or the same version. And later on, I'll come to what you have to do if it's a higher or lower version. Now, when we look behind the scenes, we take the curtain back, and when I log into an unknown machine, then the first thing I always do is a ps-ef pipe grep pmon. I want to see what's running on that box. What you will see here is that you find only one SID, the one for the container database. You don't find any indication of the operating system about any existence of a pluggable database. Just if you would log in to the container database, the root layer, then you can see that there are pluggable databases. That means they all share resources. There's only one SGA for all those. There's one set of background processes. Now a lot of people thought, oh, that will cause a lot of contention for the log miner because they share also the reader log stream. But for that purpose, we have added log miner, or not, have I said log miner? I meant the reader log writer, the log writer. We have added no slaves for the log writer. So you see it branches out into slave. Something, by the way, which you should switch off on AIX right now at the moment. You scroll down on the blog, I wrote something about that. We share also the SP file, control file, flashback logs, and so on. And an application from the outside will have to connect directly into the pluggable databases, ideally via SQLnet. I'll show you in a few seconds what options you will have to connect. Now, how do you start? First of all, if you want to now start with that, the first thing is you have to create a new container database. So you can use the DBCA, the configuration assistant, or you can use the DBCA, the configuration assistant. What is the difference? Anyhow, I'll show you on the next slide. But at the end, you either create a new pluggable database, or you plug in an existing database and make it a pluggable database. Now, what's the difference between those two concepts? The first one is, if you purely use the DBCA, you say, hey, create a container database, it will create all options. You will see the option screen doesn't allow you any choice. And what we learned over time, and we knew that from the beginning, but the multi-tenant group didn't know that, or they didn't want to believe it, customers don't want that. They don't want to have all options valid in there for licensing reasons or whatever reason it is, compliance reasons. So if you want to have less than all options, then your way guides you also through the DBCA. You say, I create a custom database, and I create only scripts at the end. And when you get the scripts, you edit the scripts. And what you see here on the slide, you don't have to read it, but what's red here is, that's all the components. I just commented them out. So when I kick off now the shell script or the batch file to create my container database, it will create a perfectly well-running container database, but without those options in there. And this is now allowed, it's officially supported, and it gives you a handle, but it's a little bit of workaround. In the next upcoming release of Oracle, we'll allow you that from the DBCA, but it was too late to change that inside the DBCA. Now one of the reasons is why you need to play with it right now, catcon. Catcon PL is a Perl script. And in order to execute now SQL scripts for many purposes, you have to deal with catcon. Simple reason why is, if you have a single tenant, you have a root container, you have a PDB $seed, which is read-only all the time, and you have an active pluggable database, and you need now to execute a script everywhere. And in order to do this right, catcon will become your friend. Think of that like a marriage which is arranged. So you don't know your partner before, but there's no way out. And that's how you could treat catcon. It has a lot of options, and I'll show you a simple example for catcon. I would like to run the pre-upgrade script. That's all pre-upgrade check script. And it needs to be run in the root, in the seed, and also in a pluggable database. So let's start by calling the Oracle Perl. That's important, don't use UOS Perl. I run catcon, which is an RDBMS admin, and you see now I use a bunch of options. -n gives you the parallel degree. I say 1 because I want one output script here. Then the directory where my script I want to execute is located, my log directory where I log into, and a base name for the log files. And a lot of these options are mandatory. And finally at the end, I execute now pre-upgrade.sql. So all that just to execute a SQL script. That's a learning experience to learn how to deal with that. It's powerful, but it will imply also that you have to change some of your well-known processes and setups. In a container database environment, we have down here the gray brick, the root layer. We have the seed over there, we don't care about the seed. And I have two pluggable databases, and you'll see my two pluggable databases, they both have the emp and the dept table. Now, as soon as I plug them in, they exchange information. So in the root layer, I see that I have an emp table down over here and an emp table over there. But the two pluggable databases, they don't know anything that in the other one, there's also an emp and a dept table. Data stays in the pluggable databases, but the dictionary information gets shared with the CDP $root. How about users? In my pluggable databases, here I have Scott and Hugo. But Scott and Hugo in PDB1 don't know anything about the existence of their twin brothers, Scott and Hugo in PDB2. Whereas in my root container, of course, I see that I have Scott and Hugo here and there. Now, in order to administer my pluggable databases, Scott and Hugo are local users. I need special users, and we call them the common users. So common users can, again, relax. I almost did everything so far with the Oracle supplied users because every Oracle supplied user is a common user, SUS system, OLAP SUS, and so on. But if you want to restrict access for common users and say, I have a common user now which will administer PDB1 and another one which will only administer PDB2, like my boss and ADM, you have to create your own common users. And if you don't like the prefix, which looks pretty like as we had purchased that feature by Microsoft or so, the C##, then you can overwrite now the common user prefix with your own. The recommendation is that you don't use an empty string, but whatever is convenient for you, and a lot of people didn't like C##. But you will need common users by yourself only if you want to restrict their access. Then how about table spaces? You will see that your CDP $root has a system sysaux, a temp, and it's the only location for undo. All pluggable databases share undo down here in the CDP $root. You will find also that each PDB has a system sysaux and a temp table space. And of course, the data table spaces. So as a summary to that is, in single tenant, back to my original topic, that means you have a slightly larger footprint on disk. You have, per se, just one database. Your data is in here PDB1, but you get 3 system table spaces, you get 3 sysalgs table spaces, you get 2 temp table spaces, and by default also 2 user table spaces, where you can drop this one here if you don't need it. It's just 5 megabytes by default, but still your footprint on disk is a little bit larger. Now, how do we connect? Let's connect to the CDB $root. So I export the Oracle SID on the command line, and then I say /sysdba, and I say show con name, and you see, you can't read it, but it says CDB $root over there. So that is easy. So you can connect to the CDB $root just via OS authentication, as you know it before. But if I do the same thing to connect to a pluggable database, so I say export Oracle SID PDB2, and now I start /sysdba, then it's a surprise because it tells me connected to an idle instance. Why is that? Because there is no PDB2 I can connect to via OS authentication. I'm connecting to a PDB2, but the system would assume that this is a real database called PDB2 with the SID PDB2, which is a shared memory segment PDB2. There is none, because there is no specific thing for PDB2. So we can't connect via OS authentication that way. How do we connect? Few different examples. First is via SQLnet. So I say SQL plus sys password at, and then the TNS alias, PDB2, and sysdba. So I connect into it, and I say show con name, and now this will be cut off, but it would say PDB2, so believe it, even if you can't see it. Second thing is the Easy Connect, which is so easy that I always have to consult Tim Hall's page to find out how the Easy Connect works. I can't remember it. So it's at // then the host name, localhost, / again, then the name PDB2, as sysdba, show con name, it says PDB2 again. And the third way, we have a toTask variable. So it's a toTask, export toTask to PDB2, and then SQL plus sys/oracle at, oh, no, I don't need at. I go via toTask as sysdba. But you see, it's a change. Show con name will give me PDB2. So that is a lot of change because this applies to your scripts and all your other stuff as well. How can I switch between containers? Let's connect again via OS authentication into the CDB $root. SQL plus /sysdba. Show con name, it's a CDB $root. How do I connect now to the PDB when I'm logged in? I set all the sessions that container PDB2. And if I check the container name, it would tell me PDB2, so it's outside of the scope here, but it is there. I say all the sessions that container equals CDB $root, and unfortunately there's no shortcut for that. And then show con name, then I'm back in the CDB $root container. Okay, so far so good. That means for you, you need to be aware, especially if you have cron jobs or jobs which you used to connect to your databases. So if you rely on OS authentication, what could you do? You could use an alias in the script with all the sessions that container command. You could also go in via toTask, but toTask doesn't help you in a way that it does not allow you to connect /s. You still have to specify username and password. You can use an external password store, the wallets, that works well. Or what I really like to do is I switch my jobs. I don't execute them with cron anymore. I use the scheduler in the database because then I have everything in one place, and I use the SQL script type and the backup script type. Or you change your scripts fundamentally and say, I use cutconpl, because that will allow you OS authentication to execute your scripts and connect into a specific container. But all that means you have to change something in your setup. And that's something why we say, play with that now to learn what you have to change. Because one day, it may be the default, and then you sit there and say, oh my God, what did they do at Oracle? What did they smoke? No, we don't. Smoking is bad, bad, bad. So how do we plug into the entire piece? First thing is we create a new pluggable database. Very simple. create pluggable database, and via the file name convert, I convert just the seeds directory into my new one, and with a click, center command, I have a new pluggable database, and it's ready. I can now immediately start importing my data into it, transporting data into it, whatever. If I'm in ASM or if I use Oracle managed files, I don't even have to say file name convert. Second option, I clone a pluggable database. So local clone is simply I'm logged into my root and I say create pluggable database PDB2 from PDB1. But this is only multi-tenant, not single tenant. In single tenant, what I can do is I can clone remotely. So I can say I unplug this one or make a clone copy down here and I say create pluggable database PDB1 from PDB1 at CDB1. Now, even though that looks like a TNS alias, it's not. It's a database link. So I need a database link from here up to there, and I'm logged in here, and I say, get me a copy of my pluggable database. That is very powerful. If you think of that call, somebody really important in your company calling you on Friday, you want to go home, and the call is coming in at 4 and saying, we need for the weekend a clone of the production database. Can you get this? And I say, oh. Very simple, very straightforward, way easier than dealing now with your backups to restore them somewhere and recovering that stuff. So that is powerful. So third option, we upgrade and then plug in. So you see this is my database and it feels really lonely down there. It sits there and says, what can we do? Okay, we need to upgrade it to 12c because if you want to plug in that database, make it a pluggable database, it needs to be upgraded. Then we started read-only, and when it's read-only, we create the XML manifest. That is a simple XML file which has not a physical layout and a few characteristics of that database. We call it with dbms pdb describe. Once the file is created, I shut down my database down here. I log in now into my root container over there, and from there I execute a create pluggable database. I can use the same name, or I give it a new name in my case, PDB1, using this XML file, and temp file reuse. I use also the no copy option, meaning my files stay in place. I don't move them, which is good, but be aware you need a backup of your database, because if that statement fails for whatever reason, you are in really deep trouble. If you're unsecure with that, uncertain, then you better use the copy option, which would be the default, but it takes a little bit longer. And this is not the end of the story, because once it's plugged in, it's just plugged in. Then you have to run, this is a one-time thing, the non-CDB, it wasn't a CDB before, to PDB script. It's a sanity script, which now cleans up the dictionary, and it's really like when you're in church for the marriage, and the father says, okay, do you want to really marry that boy, that girl, and exchange rings on the first kiss. And once the kiss is over, then you're married, no divorce possible in Catholic Church, officially. So you're here, there, and same here, we don't leave you out anymore. There's no reverse of that script. So once you're in, you're in. You can, of course, unload your data with data pump or transportable table spaces. That's possible. Now let's upgrade and see why the concept has some charm. Don't believe the documentation in that case. The documentation will tell you that upgrade is so easy and simple because there's nothing in a pluggable database except for your data. And our marketing slides told you something really similar, and they still do. Just a day ago, we had to clean out that from a marketing campaign and say, that is not true what you're saying here. Now, if you look into the dictionary, you'll find out that a lot of things are now connected with metadata links. So a lot of dictionary tables have a new column called sharing. And in that column, you'll find if something is connected together. So like information just replicated between PDB and CDB $root. But if you really dig into the dictionary, you'll find, let's say for obj $, that in my root container, of course I have obj $, and it allocates a certain number of bytes. But if I look into a PDB, it has its own dictionary. And some of the dictionary objects have their own footprint, their own data. So a PDB has a full dictionary, and therefore it needs to be upgraded as well. Now, which concepts, which strategies do we have? First of all, we can upgrade everything at once. So we take this here 12.101, and we upgrade it in 12.102 all together. Or the second option is we unplug, plug, and then upgrade. So we take the pluggable database in a lower version, plug it into a higher version, but then we have to upgrade it because it has a dictionary. Now, everything at once. I take everything at once here. So that means this is my single tenant environment. I run pre-upgrade, then I start it up in upgrade mode in 12.102 environment, and now I kick off the upgrade with cutctlpl, the command line upgrade, or the DDUA would do the same thing, and it will always upgrade the root container first, and then the pluggable databases in groups together. Now it depends how powerful your box is. If your machine is powerful and you have a real multi-tenant environment, you can upgrade 32 or 64 in parallel together if you want. But what you get is, you get 2 upgrade cycles at least. You have 1 upgrade cycle for the root and 1 for the pluggable databases together. And you execute all scripts with cutcon. Now the unplug-plug technique is having first a new container database, 12.102, now creating the XML manifest for unplugging it, shutting it down, and then plug it into the next version. That is what our marketing slide said. That is not the end of the story, because as I said before, this has a dictionary, so it needs to be upgraded as well. So we need to run an upgrade on that container. The good thing here is, in that case, you can do everything with SQL+ if you want. You don't need to fiddle around with cutcon. And bad thing, or the downside, I wouldn't say the bad thing, but the downside, you have to think of that, is you need an extra container database, a second one, which allocates resources. And then you may be also in naming trouble. So be aware of that. So everything at once, pretty good concept, very straightforward, and very, very powerful for multi-tenant especially. But in a single-tenant environment, I would probably turn to this one here. You can use cutcon, but you don't have to, and it's only 1 upgrade. So it's pretty similar from the duration to your upgrades before. Whereas this has always 2 upgrade cycles at least. So your upgrade may be longer. Now let's work with pluggable databases, and don't ever try to open a coconut with your teeth. I think it's a bad idea. So what you'll see in the databases that we have now the user views as before, all DBA views, but you find also that you have almost 1,000 neo views, all starting with CDB underscore. And the differentiator is the con ID. So the con ID is the differentiator. And you find a lot of those new views here. So you don't have only a CDB, DBA users, you have now also a CDB underscore users. And in a standalone environment, the con ID is always 0 because everything belongs to everything. And there's no differentiation. But if you have a container database, multi-tenant, single-tenant, if the ID is 1, it pertains to the root. If the ID is 2, that is an object of the seed. And if it's 3 to 254, then it pertains to a pluggable database. So for my previous example, with the Scott and Hugo users, that would mean we have Scott and Hugo twice in CDB underscore users, but one with con ID 3 and the other one with con ID 4. Character sets. All character sets need to be equal. There's no way of taking AL32 database and plug it into a container database which has been created with W8, ISO, whatever. That is not possible. If you have character set inconveniences or differences, then you use the DMU, the Data Migration Assistant, which is installed in your Oracle Home already. You're under the Oracle Home, you have a /DMU. The only thing you have to do if you want to play with the DMU, you have to change the bit to execute for the DMU, and then you can use that. Parameters. I told you before we share the SP file. Oops. But when you set something in a PDB, where do you find it? First of all, you find in VDOLA parameter there's new columns, and one is PDB modifiable, meaning you can change a parameter in a PDB, on a PDB level. But when you do that, it's not written in the SP file, and this is a big change for DBAs. You will find it in the VDOLA system parameter view. And if you go into your CDB$ root, you find a different parameter set for different PDBs in the $V system parameter based on the differentiation by con ID. Interesting thing is if you unplug a PDB, you take your specific PDB parameters with you because they will be written in the XML manifest as well. Standby databases. That's also interesting. First concept here, I create a new pluggable database. So it will be provisioned from the seed, very simple. That will be rolled to the standby as well. Second thing, cloning a pluggable database locally. So I have here my production, here my standby, and I'll clone PDB1 locally, and the same thing will happen on the standby as well. This, by the way, is not possible in single tenant because then you have two active pluggable databases. And if you do that, it requires active data guard. The third option, and that's the very interesting part, I take now a standalone database and plug it in. And this is not rolled automatically to the standby now. You have to manually copy your files, and then the command can proceed on the standby. That is kind of inconvenience at the moment, maybe changed later, but right now it's important to know that if you really play with that, you need to know that you have to copy your files manually in that case. RAC. I have a container database, single tenant here, and that means on my instance, RAC instance node 1, I have also PDB instance ID 1. And same on the node 2, but it don't have to. It can be only active on the second node. That's also possible. The thing, it's very straightforward, very simple, but the thing you need to be aware is, if we now look now and check CRS-CTL status, we find that we have resources now for all the pluggable databases in there as well, and it's not necessarily on both nodes. It could be only on node 1 or node 2, and I can define also sort of failover scenarios and say, okay, if my PDB on node 1 goes down, please bring it up on node 2 and so on. Thing you need to be aware, your resource list may be a little bit long if you really play with that. At Oracle, we have a deployment with 18 production active pluggable databases on an Exadata rack. So you see it's a really long list of resources at some point. Now, where the fun part starts is when you diagnose issues. So if you dig down into the alert log, you may be sometimes very surprised that here I have 2 apex errors, but no indication at which PDB, which error has happened. So sometimes you really have to drill down to the trace files to do that. If you do a system state dump, that will give you clearly an idea what happened in which PDB. That's pretty straightforward, very well done. But the alert log sometimes lacks a little bit of information at the moment. What I like a lot is the built-in isolation. The typical case I see quite often at customers is that the application developer always wants to have DBA. We need DBA because we want to do something. And then there's this fight. DBAs don't want to give the application developers DBA rights. So in that case, it's pretty cool because as the PDB is more or less isolated, you can give an application developer DBA rights in there. They can riot if they want in your pluggable database. If you don't like what they do, you just kick away the pluggable database. It kills. And they can't affect your CDP $root. And the same thing applies to multi-tenant, which is pretty powerful, actually. Another thing I just grabbed a few weeks ago from the Oracle forum, from the OTN forum. Where are the AWR tables? Somebody had his own scripts going directly into the WRH dollar tables. By the way, if you do that, that requires still a license for diagnostic pack. I just want to mention that. Whatever, it didn't run in a multi-tenant environment. So the thing you need to know is that your AWR data is stored in the root container only. It is visible in the pluggable databases based for each pluggable database. And you can run AWR report.sql from within the root container to display everything, but also from a pluggable database standpoint of view, and you get only the information for the PDB there. If you are interested, where's my ASH? Where's all the other stuff? SQL profiles Kerry talked about. Where's the baseline information? There's a really, really good table in the documentation down here showing you all the differences where something is really located now. Because there are differences in some points, and something sometimes you didn't expect. We have now introduced AWR light snapshots. That is not really the big thing for single tenant, but if you go into multi-tenant, we learned But if you have like 50 pluggable databases, a typical AWR snapshot may add a lot of extra load to the system because it does that also for the pluggable databases. And therefore, the underscore AWR snapshot level is set to best fit, meaning Oracle always knows best, right? Do we? So you can kick off a light work snapshot by yourself, just saying light, and this gives you a very good snapshot actually, but it doesn't have everything you want. So give this a try, check this. Yeah, one thing I struggle quite often with is I have a G login. SQL Plus / SysDB, I know it's really hard to read, but it says at the beginning that the connect identifier, CDB2. Now if I do an alter session, set container equals PDB2, the problem, or PDB3 in that case, problem is my connect identifier on the login prompt does not change. And actually in almost every second workshop, a customer is coming in the breaks and saying, do you have a workaround for that? So G login, connect identifier, I don't have any yet, except for reconnecting. So that is sometimes a little bit of an inconvenience, I would call it. Somebody has a good workaround, I'm happy to learn about that. Yeah, one thing, if you unplug a PDB, let's say for the upgrade, unplug, plug upgrade, you need to drop it later on. So I do an alter pluggable database, close, I create the manifest file to unplug it, and when I unplug it, that's good. But you don't have, you please don't forget that after that, you have to log in here and say drop pluggable database PDB1, and be aware, keep data files. If you miss that part, you drop your pluggable database, including the data files. Why do you have to do that? The simple reason is the container database over here, it has a lot of information about that pluggable database. And if you just unplug it, it keeps that information in its dictionary. So if you want to create now a new pluggable database called PDB1, and the information from the previous one is kept in a dictionary, you're in trouble. That doesn't go through. So be aware of that. When you unplug, move it somewhere else. Don't forget to drop the information, but always say keep data files. 3 slides to go. Compatibility check. I take this pluggable database. I have unplugged it from 12.101. I would like to plug it into 12.102. So the documentation will tell you, thank you, perfect, good in time. The documentation will tell you, do a compatibility check. So dbim is PDB check plug compatibility. And I check here only for it's compatible. And what does it say? Any guesses? Yes or no? It says no. That is kind of weird. Why is it not compatible? It says no because it has a 12.101 dictionary, and I plug it into 12.102. So don't get misled by that. Even though it says compatible, no, of course I can unplug it. And when I have unplugged, sorry, I can plug it in. When I have plugged it in afterwards, you need to check PDB plug-in violations. And in PDB plug-in violations, I will find an error. Here I have only warnings. But if I find an error, I have to really pay attention. And this error will give me exactly what I have to do. It will tell me, you have a pluggable database, which is dictionary 12.101. Your container database is 12.102. You have to upgrade now your pluggable database. And once I upgraded it, then I can open it unrestricted and all work well. But be aware, sometimes compatibility check gives you wrong information. The downside with that view is if you play really heavily with that feature, and I've did that, and apparently I ended up with some sort of 10,000 entries in my PDB plugin violations, you have to really filter closely via date and especially via errors. Because the warnings often are quite misleading, not helpful at all, and that view does not get purged at all. So over time you get a lot of entries. And one thing for people who want to see everything, if I check here my data files, and this is hard now to figure out because the important column is missing, it's cut off, but you would see that you missed 2 data files, actually the data files of the seed. And the reason is that this parameter excludes seed CDB view by default is set to true. So everything in every view which belongs to the PDB $seed is excluded. Now, as you are all honest DBAs, there are some cases when you want to see everything in your scripts. Armin, don't worry, does it right. But it may be the case that you have your own backup scripts going into data file names or something like that. Could be the case. So in that case, you would miss 2 files because those 2 here with the container ID 2 are excluded by default. So if you would like to really see everything, you have to say exclude seed cdb view equals false, and then everything gets displayed. So some features that don't work are, we have to be honest, there are some things which don't work at the moment. I think the most important thing, or the most 2 things which hurt you, is there is no flashback pluggable database. That is coming in the next release. You can flashback the entire thing, but you can't flashback just the plug-up database. In a single-tenant environment, that does not hurt you at all, because there it doesn't matter. But in a multi-tenant environment, that may hurt you. You don't want to flashback all the 8 other applications as well at the same time. But single-tenant, this is not a hurting point. The other thing is, for some people, that Streams is not working in multi-tenant environments. Streams, deprecated only in 12c. Fully supported. Deprecated means just we may give no support later for Streams, but it's fully working, fully supported, but not in multi-tenant. And then the automatic data optimization with the heat map is not there. So that's the things which are not there at the moment. So what should you do? What would I recommend? What's yes, what's no? Con and pros. Okay, there are a few cons. Actually, there are a few. It has single tenant, a larger, slightly larger footprint on disk. But hey, disk is cheap. By the way, we at Oracle, we offer you a nice CFS appliance disk. No, I don't want to go into that. Larger footprint, you have to be aware of that. It doesn't matter if you do it with 3 databases, but it matters if you do it with 2,000 databases, like one of our huge customers in Europe. You have a very slight performance overhead because there needs to be some syncing between the root container and the seed. We speak of 2 to 3% of performance overhead. You have to learn to deal with Capcom, which is sometimes a little bit inconvenient, but it is powerful in another way as well. And you have to learn that some tasks need to be spread now between the root container and the PDB. But this is also a good thing, because you can let people do something in a PDB and they can do whatever they want and you don't care, because tasks are spread. There are also some other things like the upgrade cycles, and some applications may not be certified yet, but I would see it from a different point of view as a learning thing. What I would recommend to you is try it with 2, 3, maybe 5 databases right now. If you go to 12, identify a few systems which are part of your backup concept, which are part of your monitoring concept, but just with not so super important systems to get your experience. And then when 12.2 is coming out and you say, yes, we really give it a try, or maybe in Oracle, whatever the next release is, then you have that experience and you don't start like a blind man in the flock. So give it a try. It is powerful. It gives you a lot of options. And I would say, hey, try it out if you go to 12. Thank you for your attention. I'll be here at a lunch break, and after lunch, we do full transportable export with ARM and incremental backups. And thanks for your patience. See you later.